Hello, and welcome to the Modern Romantic Podcast, where we celebrate and inspire romanticism through passionate people doing incredible things. Hi, I don't have a witty intro today, so hi, I'm Trey, and I'm joined by my co host Emily, who is so surprised that I don't have a witty intro today.
Who are you?
You know what? I'm fired. Done. I'm out.
Yeet.
Uh, Yeet. And I'm joined by my co host Emily, in case I didn't say that. How are you, Emily?
I am doing great.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I have this great story I want to tell just really quickly.
Okay.
Shout out to Vintage Village Antiques in Osakis, Minnesota. They
Mm.
hosted a photography group I'm in over the weekend, and we went out there, and it's kind of like this little town. They have like a church and a general store and an old schoolhouse and a couple of like a general store and shops and things like that. It's like original buildings that were either moved there or were there, I believe. And then they have all these antiques in all of them. And so it's kind of like if you're into antiques, it's a feast for the eyes. It's also just like a lot of antiques. So like you're looking through these things and you're like, wow, there's a calendar from 1923. It's over 100 years old now.
What?
Things like that. And so they also have some animals and things like that, which are kind of neat to see the chickens and stuff. Well, it's out in the middle of the country, and I had never been there before. And so I went to leave, and I just, on my GPS, I just hit go to go home, hit home, and then go. And the GPS, I was just going to like do what it said, keep it easy. I don't remember which direction I came in. I'm just going to follow the blue line. And that is what I did, much to my friend Jane's dismay when she saw me like go down this road that she decided was no longer a road because it was a gravel road that turned into little two tracks through the grass, and then eventually those disappeared and it was just grass, and then it felt like I was driving through somebody's yard. Yeah, I'm not kidding you. The tracks disappeared. Meanwhile, my GPS is like, yeah, you're on the right path. You're fine. And next thing I know, I'm on it. This like I'm back on two tracks in a cornfield, and I'm driving my car, which by the way I just bought, and I'm trying not to ruin
Oh.
through this cornfield. And I finally made it to a road, and I exit it, and I called my friend Jane then because she was in the car like behind me, and she did not follow me. She was like, I'm not going down there. But here's the fun part. So I'm driving past the house when the two truck disappeared and it's just grass. And I was like, this feels wrong. But the GPS is like, yep, keep going. So I was like, my car happens to be a hybrid. And it was just really good timing because I was like, I hope this isn't the type of situation where people like, they could shoot me or something. This is the middle of the country. And like, I'm in someone's yard basically with my car driving through. But at that moment, my car's engine stopped running so it could run on the battery. So I drove through there super silently.
Okay.
Yeah, it was great. So I felt really stealthy in it. Anyway, shout out to Vintage Village Antiques for giving me this great experience because it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been there.
That is incredible. Can I also do a shout out to somebody that gave me a fantastic experience this weekend?
Please do.
Cool. Major shout out to Matthew's Playhouse here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Um, had hosted, I think, their second weekend of performances of Peter and the Starcatcher. If you're not familiar with that, it is a play based on the young adult novels that tell the origin story of Peter Pan. The fun thing about this play is that the characters are never named fully, as we know them. So, like when eventually Tinkerbell is created, she's never named. Peter Pan is never fully named Peter Pan. You either hear Peter or you hear Pan, but never them together. Or like the Lost Boys, you get lost, and then someone will immediately follow up with boys, and you get this nice thing to clue into the audience. Anyway, it's a fantastic production.
Hmm.
I namely want to shout out the actor who who opened the second act dressed as a mermaid, like it was a found object style mermaid. of like different random things from your house that you glued onto yourself to make you look glamorous, and opened the second act as thus. Sits down. This is a fully barrel chested man with hair gleaming out behind a seashell bra with two mackerels sitting on the bra itself. And he goes, just another Friday night in Matthews. Also, my family is here tonight. And I told them not to sit front row. And you know what they did? They sat second row. Music starts playing and he goes, me, and then proceeds with the rest of the song.
Just breaks the fourth wall there.
It was great. Um, Such a special production, such a special show, and also I have not laughed that hard in quite some time. So thank you, Matthews Playhouse. That was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
It sounds like it was fun.
Yeah. Though not as grandiose as probably some of the experiences that our guests had today. So, Emily, would you introduce our fantastic guest today?
Yes, absolutely. Um, 1 second. I'm checking my audio. Trey, can you say something?
Saying something.
We're good. Okay. Um, I'll edit that out later if I need to. Or I might leave it in because nobody's perfect. Um, I feel like you should be introducing Kay because you guys have so much more in common, and I think this is going to be a great episode because of that. But Kay Sparling is with us today. Kay is an opera singer turned author with a book named Mission Thaw that's out, and we're just excited to talk about all of it. So, welcome to the podcast, Kay.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, everybody.
Kay, I have so many questions as it relates to opera, but I would be so remiss if we didn't open up this discussion by asking, how is Paducah?
Paducah is fine. As a matter of fact, she's up on her regular perch. Anytime I'm podcasting or writing, she has a tall perch she lays on. She's my muse. And yeah, she has become the diva of the house for some time. During COVID, I since I moved to the Upper Midwest, I have a small theater company, and of course we were shut down, so we were trying to do what everybody was doing. Got video equipment, turned my studio into a recording studio, and off we went. And
Mm-hmm.
we had to be careful, like we could only have small ensembles and that kind of thing, or solos or duets. But she had so many shenanigans during that time that by the time we were finished, she literally got in the bio with her pub picture and a bio. And then that kind of started it. And then when I became an author, it just sort of has blossomed celebrity. But Paducah is fine. Yeah. She's always getting into trouble. We call her the fearless invincible because the things a bat got in my house a few years ago, and it was a big bat. It was in the middle of the night, and I wake up because I hear her making noise. I turn on the light, and a bat is on my nightstand 6 inches from me looking at me. And it was a
Whoa.
big bat. I jumped under the covers, covered my head, grabbed my phone, called the police, and I'm just I'm scared to death. And she's there acting like a mountain lion, like trying to get this bat every time it flies by. We call her the bat slayer now. And I'm sure the bat was much more scared than Paducah. Well, I was probably the most scared. But anyway, yeah, she's just fearless. So yeah, she's pretty not known in these parts.
I love that about an animal. I like a fearless animal.
I do
I'm
too.
not sure why, but I do. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's very gentle, and if you come here, I mean, she'll let you pet her or anything, but she will defend you till the end. And that's what she was doing that night. So, yeah.
I feel like that from some things I found in other interviews that you've done, I feel like that might have inspired some of the characters that you've written, but we'll get into that. Um, I am so curious about your opera background. So please, I know you grew up in Iowa, correct?
I grew up in Central Illinois, you know.
Illinois. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, for a while I was in Springfield, Illinois, and then when I was in sixth grade, we moved out way out in the country. So I grew up basically as a country girl. Yeah,
well, please tell me how you went from being country girl to jet-setting opera singer.
I know
Please,
that.
please tell us.
That is so weird. I'll kind of go backwards. I was apprenticing, and a very famous conductor said to me, I said something that was very, a country, thing. Like I might have said something like, I don't know, something that made him like, because he's a big city slicker. He's like, "Where'd you get that at?" And I'm like, "I grew up on a farm." And he is like, "You did not," because by then, I'm apprenticing at this big, international opera house. And I'm like, "Oh, I did," And I told him the story, and I even put it in the book, where I would ride my horse down to the covered bridge and let the horse, eat it there at the banks of the little creek. I'd get up in the rafters of the covered bridge, and I'd start singing show tunes, and it would just sound so big, and it would go all the way through the valley. And I didn't know it at the time, but my mom told me, well, yeah, all the retired farmers and farmers' wives and stuff would come out and, yeah, listen every day. They called it my concert. And, my dad got me a map when I was in eighth grade of Manhattan, and I took pins and I put it on all the Broadway houses in the Metropolitan Opera. I mean, I was I was convinced I was going to do it, and it. I think when it's meant to be, it doesn't matter where you are, things are going to happen. I mean, such wild coincidences would happen. Like, I was 5 years old when I decided I wanted to be on the stage and be a singer. When they took me to see Sound of Music, and at the intermission, I just told my parents, "That's what I want to do." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "I want to do that. I want to sing like that. I want to be that little girl in that movie." And they were like, "Oh, okay, honey." 2 years later, I'm 7 years old. My mom puts me in the Sangamon County Fair Little Junior Miss talent show, and I sing, and I win. And then this man comes up, and he's like, "I'm a scout. I just happen to be here because I have relatives in the area. I would like to audition your daughter for the youngest Von Trapp a child in a professional Sound of Music for next
Yeah.
summer." And I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, my dad was a mechanic. My mom worked at a clothes store. I mean, and they're going, okay. And this is in St. Louis, and we live, outside of Springfield. And so my parents made it happen, though. And every time something like that happened, they would do it, and so I tell my students all the time, doesn't matter if you're from a small town in Wisconsin, you can make it all the way. And I've proven that. A lot of them have now on Broadway and in opera. So, I, yeah, I, I think that um, it's all about, you have to have the talent, obviously, but it's also how hard will you work at that talent to make it something, and the sacrifices and the changes that have to go in your life as that career develops, and that, so you have to have the what they call the package, of course, and then um, you have to have a lot of lucky breaks. Let's face it, you just do, right? I mean, sometimes I would go to auditions later on in life. This was either in musical theater or opera, and they're like, "God, you're beautiful, but we need a brunette." It's not going to work. Love your voice, but I mean, it can be that arbitrary. It's just like whatever they say. And then there'll be times when you would go into an audition, particularly in opera, and everything would go wrong. You'd get poured on, trying to go from the cab to the audition place, and you look terrible and you're freezing, and you're not in good voice, and you go ahead and you sing and you think that was just awful, and nothing's going to happen from that, and the next day they call you and say you have the job. So I mean, you just you have to be ready for anything, and you have to be able to literally get up and move all the time wherever that career takes you, especially in opera. And that can be very difficult, to leave your life behind and say, okay, I'm going to live out of a suitcase for 3 years, and I'm not going to have any of my stuff, and it's all going to be in storage. And because when you're an opera singer star, you don't stay in one opera house and do a whole bunch of roles for them. You contract role by role by role wherever that might be, so you're constantly on the road, and so that's 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 difficult, to put a lot of your life on hold,
Mm-hmm.
for that kind of thing. But the great parts of it are when everything falls together, and every artist has that time when it's a perfect cast and a perfect direction, and a wonderful set and wonderful costumes, and everything just comes together, and then you're singing your aria and everybody you know jumps to their feet and is screaming afterwards. Then you go, yeah, maybe it's worth it, all the work and all the sacrifices. So it gets in your blood. You become an adrenaline junkie. Let's face it. And that role so I can sing with that singer or work with that. There's always goals that you keep setting for yourself. And
Yeah, I,
life, but I did. I love it.
it was one of those things, I think,
I just retired from singing two
for
years
its
ago.
time.
Really, really old, to be still singing. And to tell you the truth, if it hadn't been for a thyroid surgery, I could still sing. Because I I um I worked with Birgit Nilsson in Sweden when she
Oh,
was 77 years old. I went over and took some lessons with her, and stayed at her home. And I just assumed that the chords were no longer working. And one night she wanted had some friends over to meet me and hear me sing, and so I was going to do that. And we were sitting at the table, and she was had gotten up and was giving people more water. And someone said something like, um, what have you been working on with Kay? And she's like, well, there's this one interval and this one aria, Tosca, and you know, and then we were talking about high notes and high C, and she just, someone said, well, Birgit, when did you lose your high C's? And she just wallowed out one, you know, and it was perfect. She was 77. And then later
that's
we
amazing.
talked, and she said, oh yeah, dramatic sopranos will die before the voice dies. We're totally different than the rest of the different vocal fox. And, and anyway, I was like, okay, well, it's something to look forward to. And I was really singing strong until I had to have the thyroid surgery. And then, you know, it just didn't come back, guys, the way I wanted it to. And so I said, maybe this is a good time to say goodbye to the stage and just concentrate on my students, and give what someone might call me to do. I could just give to a student now. And so that's what I'm doing. And I'm fine. I got to sing so much longer than most of my soprano friends. So I feel very blessed. And, the thyroid had to come out. And so that's the
Yeah.
way it was. So,
Your health needs to come first.
well, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am.
And I was embarking on this new authorship thing too. So I thought, well, you close the door and a window opens, right? Another way to be creative. And so I think that really helped me too through that time.
I want to get to your authorship But I am curious, out of all the roles that you've sung, which one was your favorite?
Tosca. Absolutely
Really?
Tosca. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was a quick answer too.
Yeah.
No hesitation.
Yeah. I absolutely love her. And if you read my book, I mean, not much opera in my book, actually. So I don't want people who don't like opera to get turned off by that
Sure.
because there isn't much real opera. But one thing, when she's training with the MI6 James Bond character, he hates opera, but she gets hit in the head and beat up, and he's trying to keep her awake because he doesn't know if she has a concussion or something. They're trying to escape, and so he's like, "Tell me a story," because he's trying to keep her awake because she wants to go unconscious. And so she tells him the story of Tosca. And the reason I picked Tosca is it is my favorite role. I like her because she is an opera singer, you know, and she is a good person, and she just steps into the wrong setting where this oppression is going to get her no matter what, her and the person she's in love with, the artist. And this baron is going to, he's the sheriff of the town, so to speak, and he wants her, and he's willing to destroy her and able to do that. And you know he sends her, the tenor artist lover, away. And and then basically tries to rape her one night. And she just picks up a letter opener and kills the guy right through the heart. And he is. But that's how circumstances can push a person to the very limits. And of course, she tries to escape, but there isn't too much to escape. And so then the posse comes after her, and so she's up on this big tall tower, like the town is on a hill. So she runs up there, and well, she ends up jumping off and committing suicide because she knows that they will assassinate her, if they catch her. So it's so tragic. But there's so much beauty in the relationship, and there's so much beauty in her relationship, with her singing. And it's tragic, but it's beautiful at the same time. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so much of opera. Like I love. I might be in the minority here, but I do actually like Otello and the way that it
Hmm.
is composed. It's so
Hmm.
tragic, but you feel so much for those characters.
Hmm. Definitely. Definitely. I mean, it's funny because I'm a Verdi soprano, and I picked a Puccini opera as my favorite. But yeah, Verdi is a master at what you were just describing. Just a master. I think he is the greatest opera composer ever. Some people would say Mozart. Some people might say Puccini. Some people would say Wagner. But I'm going to say Verdi every time. I'm not Italian, but I could be, because when you go to Italy, there's like God, and then there's Verdi, and sometimes they flip that. And so I'm kind of in that. And the kids, when they first walk in my studio, whether they're high school or college or even professional opera singers, they'll say, "Okay, you like Verdi?" Because like all around the studio are these really famous pictures of Verdi. So he is my favorite composer, and um, I find his life the most interesting of all of the composers that composed opera. Yeah.
I don't remember a lot about his life. I know more of his work than I do more about his life, which makes probably
Mhm.
me a very bad like former opera singer. But um,
You're a former
I
opera singer? You didn't tell me that.
I I stepped away from it for a few different reasons.
Mhm,
But there are things about it that I do miss, and I miss how much you get wrapped up into the story and how character centric so much opera can be.
mhm,
If it's done really well and staged really
mhm,
well, well,
mhm.
you feel it Mm.
Oh yeah.
So there are things that I miss about it. Um, now I didn't have the grand flying experience that you did, but yeah, I miss it sometimes.
And you,
Now,
I'm gonna guess you might have been a baritone.
bass baritone.
Okay. Yeah. Just going
Uh,
on your voice, your speaking voice. Yeah. Yeah. I thought
yeah.
you had a little more resonance than the average bear, and I
Oh,
thought, why he must be an actor. I didn't know you'd been an opera singer. That's totally making sense to me now.
let me just toss my hair a second. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So what
Um,
was your favorite role?
oh wow. Um, operatically, I really liked. I was not prepared for such a question. So
I'm sorry. Just want to
no.
know. You can
Um,
think about it.
I love this because I was going to ask if you didn't.
I okay. So I never really performed with like a full opera in an opera house. I've always wanted to. I really do. But there was a summer program that I got to do where they offered me second speaker in Die Zauberflöte, or
Okay.
the magic flute.
Hmm.
And I got to go in, I got to sing that, and there was not only dialogue that we had added some parts to, but also the pieces of itself. I loved that role so much because there was a chorus that I got to sing in. I got to be really funny in it, and sometimes you
Hmm.
cannot really do comedy in that show, and it just I don't know. It was honestly, it was just really fun. It was a bit part, but
Cool.
I loved it so much.
Well, there are no bit parts. Remember that, right? Everybody,
Right.
they wouldn't have written it if they didn't need it. that's what
Uh,
that's my philosophy. Yeah, I have to tell you, Troy, the funniest thing when I was developing into, well, first it developed in, this is long going here. Started out a lyric mezzo, then went to
mhm.
lyric soprano, and um, one of my apprentices, the first role I had was second lady in Magic Flute. But this is the funny part. You will love this. So there was this guy that was going around directing, and he had these ideas that he was going to take and set operas in totally different settings. And he
Mhm.
talked an opera house into doing a Magic Flute on Mars. Okay. I'm not kidding you. Okay. And being that I was an apprentice, I had no choice but to go along with this, right? And uh, I can't think of his name right now, but anyway, I always remembered that he had the same name as a famous actor, and people would get them mixed up at the time. It'll come to me in a second, but this is a long time ago. This was in the 80s, and and yeah, so I did a Magic Flute all on in outer space. So to speak. And then later, I worked with that guy again because I by then I needed work and I needed money. I did a cozy fan tutte sent set in New York City in 1930 in like a diner. So
What?
yeah,
I
this
like
was
these
this
twists.
yeah, this was really, really it thank God it passed. But for when I was a young opera singer, everyone had to do something like this to get started because it was really, really popular for a while. And nobody knows why now. We're all going, what? But yeah, that's true. Yeah.
um, I will say I've only been part of I think one production that they've done something like that. Everything else has been like very by the book, very traditional.
Uh-huh.
But oh god, it's so fun. We did Cendrillon, Massenet Cendrillon, but we set it in like a 1920s speakeasy sort of feel to it.
Well, then you had the same experience. Yeah.
But it was so good and so well done. Um, I could sit here and we could swap some opera stories or stories that some teachers have taught us, but I do want to make sure that we talk about your current work, which is Mission Thaw, which was inspired by opera, but also has a lot of spy elements to it. Um, and
Mm.
I, where do we start? Um, I really want to know, at what point did you finally consider yourself an author?
Good question.
That was very difficult for me, just because it was unexpected. I never dreamt that I would write a book. Um, and once I did, um, you know, all the process of, because I did everything backwards. I wrote an entire book. Then I took it to, like, a class, at a university, and they were like, "You wrote the whole book?" And I'm like, and all the learning that I had and all the drafts I had to do, and I just kept kind of worming my way into, that more of a thriller, to into the thrill world. I took a class with James Patterson, a master class, got a
Mm.
TA, and learned a lot about, the pacing of a thriller, and he was really good because he said, "Well, you're an actor, just think action, you know, and really hone it down." And so I was able to do that next draft with that. And then I worked with another person who had been trained in screenwriting. And I've always seen this story as a movie. So he helped me a lot too. And so finally we get it to the point where, it's ready for publication. And I just remember in that moment that, when that book came, how they send you the first book, and I had it in my hand, and I'm just looking at it and I'm just turning it over and over, and I just started crying because I've been I've read all my life. I read all the time. And I was like, I did this, and it's been a real difficult journey in a way to change roles after I've been a professional singer since I was 7. And to, now since August 24, I'm also a professional author. And it has been, yeah, my people, my team sometimes wait, come on, you know, and of course, because I have read such great literature, and I had a relationship early on with a who is now a very famous author. I think all that just kind of led to me just being scared at every level. So like when it came out, I was like, okay. And then, the publishers say, okay, well, now you have to have editorial reviews, and, you're going to need to be interviewed. And the first editorial reviews, you guys, I didn't sleep for like 2 weeks till they came out. And I was like, oh my goodness, um, what are they going to say? I mean, I'm just an opera
Yeah.
singer. They're going to say I don't know my beans from apple butter about writing. And and the first one came out, and it was really good, and it was 5 stars, and I was like, whoo, but then every time
Wow.
one came up, I'd go through that anxiety again. And after a while they were going well, and the interviews started going well. And so then it was a matter of, all right, now the book is out, um get a PR team behind us. And so I attended virtually a women's publishing conference that happens. It's one of the bigger ones. It happens annually, and I watched all the marketing things, and I ran into a gal that I just thought, okay, she thinks like me. And because I kind of think out of the box a lot of times on things. And I said, that's the team I want. And so I signed up for a consultation, and it went really well, and we decided to work with each other. And I have no how many podcasts now and interviews and magazine articles and all that I've had. It's getting up there, but I'm I think that has helped more than anything is the publicizing the book. Well, you're on camera like I am right at this moment. I can't really represent myself as an opera singer anymore. I'm an author, and
Sure.
so um, you know, and I now believe what they say about the book. At first, I was like, "Boy, who paid them?" To say that, kind of thing. I mean, seriously, I did, and but now I understand the book's crafted well. So those six drafts paid off. Those six full drafts paid off. And the second book I'm finishing hopefully at the end of next month, because this is a series. Caitlin Stewart has, a few missions. And so it's going so much easier and smoother because now I've got that rhythm and I understand the style of thriller, espionage thriller. And, you know, it's, yeah, it's going really smoothly, and I can't believe how quickly I'm able to write this second book. You know, so
That's
so the
nice when
book,
it goes smoothly.
yeah. So the book is based on true facts. I witnessed a lot of the things that I put in the book, and
Wow.
some of them are graphic because the main theme of this mission is to stop a human trafficking cartel that is using refugees after the USSR released all the countries they had formerly taken, like Poland, Czechoslovakia, all those countries. They left them with no infrastructure. Those people had no jobs. They were lucky if they had electricity and water. And they were starving. And so they packed up what they could and they went to the nearest Western country trying to find aid and work and such. And I just happened to be in Vienna, Austria at the time and got very, very involved in the whole refugee plight of that time. And my purpose for writing the book was, I wanted to talk about Caitlin Stewart. She was the only woman working in espionage out in the field in that, theater at the end of the Cold War. She was the only woman. So you can imagine, she's with all these He-Men CIA agents and all these He-Men MI6 agents. And, she's not just a woman, but she's an opera singer. And when her trainer first is told that she's going to be a part of it because she'll be a high profile spy that will collect information from this cartel because the leader is a big opera fan and pretty much keeps the Vienna State Opera open. And so she's got all the tools to walk right into that society, be invited into that society. And she is a great actor. And so she can, convince these neo-Nazis and KGB and all that, she sympathizes with their situation. And so they let all their guards down. And at that time, you had to plant bugs. So she could just plant bugs anywhere and, get any kind of information she needed. And she knew 4 languages. So she was pretty prepared on that end. So, people go, oh, opera singers, they'd never be a spy. Well, they're perfect spies when you think about it. They
Hmm.
can go anywhere and they know lots of languages. They're going to be, mingling with the top echelon of society. They have all the let's say, they know what a shrimp fork is. Let's put it that way. That they're very they're used to being dressed classy, and so they'll fit right in with the jet setters, so to speak. Where not everybody would. I mean, let's face it, but they're already groomed to do that. And when you're an apprentice at an international opera, let's say like the Metropolitan Opera, you get um, you get mentors assigned to you. And if they don't think you're polished in some way, they get you there real quick.
Mhm.
these Upper East Side ladies, they know what they're doing. They'll dress you, they'll accessorize you, they'll, whatever they have to do because there is that, expectation that if you're going to, be in their society, even though you are the entertainment, so to speak, you still have to walk the walk and dress the dress and etc. So, in a way, opera singing is very understandable, that they might be spies. And so, what I do is I put it in the first person, and she goes over there. She's not a spy. She's over there on a Fulbright and an
Mhm.
apprenticeship, and she's um, in her in her I guess you'd call it interview for the Fulbright and all these things that she's trying to get these grants. They tell her that, well, we don't think your German is good enough, even though you've taken it for 6 years in college, and we want you to talk like a native. We want you to speak like a native. So we want you to go over early before the apprenticeship and go to the Goethe Institute and take language lessons where they're going to pay for it. Okay, extra 3 months in Europe, that's fine with me. That's what she thinks. And so she goes, and then right away she sees things are just odd. Like young American males are following her whenever she leaves her dorm. Okay. And she catches on to this, and she actually catches one of them at one point, and says, what are you doing, why are you following me? And she's dating this guy she meets at the language school, and he tells her he's a student at Vienna university, but he's not. She goes there one day to meet him, and you know they're like, we've never heard of this guy. And so all these weird things start happening to her really early on, and then finally they have to make contact with her. They vetted her for 2 years in graduate school in the States, and now they have to make contact. That she literally was given that Fulbright and that apprenticeship to fulfill something in the
Oh.
CIA. And you know, at first when they kind of apprehend her, so that ticks her off really bad. And then when they talk to her, she's like, okay, I didn't come over here to be in a cloak and dagger group, sorry. And she gets up and she turns around and she starts to walk out, and then they go, all right, well, what if you could help bring down the Berlin Wall? Well, that's pretty
Mm.
Ooh.
that's pretty significant right there. Okay. So she turns around, she goes back to the boss man, and she says, what are you talking about? I am a podunk apprentice from Central Iowa. I'm 29 years old, and what could I possibly do? What am I gonna do? Hit a high C? Knock the thing down? I mean, come on. And they laugh and they go, no, but we need a prima donna, Mozart soprano, and we need them to be young and beautiful, and you fit all the requirements. And then they tell me that oh yeah, we've been watching you for 2 years. We've been vetting you for this. And so what is she going to do? Say no? No. So
There
they're like, you still will be apprentice, you'll still be an opera singer, but you're going to be doing something else, you know. And so instead of sending her back to the States, they train her right there, because this is a very special agent, what they call like I say, a high profile special agent. I mean, she doesn't have to, climb walls and all that kind of stuff, to make the grade. And so, so right from the beginning in this book, you're there when they do recruit her, and then it's in first person, so you're just riding on her back. And at first she's supposed to just be this information collector, and plant her bugs, and schmooze with all these neo-Nazis. And I mean, at that time, to show you how many neo-Nazis there were, Austria had a prime minister that had ran on the Nazi ticket, Kurt Waldheim. So I mean, it was pretty corrupt. And so She thinks she's going to do that, and this MI6 director that's directing both groups in this big mission, he is like, he's old fashioned. He's much older than her, 12 years older than her, and he's like, no, I don't want her on the mission. Take your ball gowns and go home. I don't want this. And the CIA bucks him and says, no, we're going to use this woman. And he's like, women should not be out in the field. Now, this guy you have to respect. He's known as the best spy in the free world. Ian Fleming used to go to this man. I changed his name and everything. Used to go to this man and say, okay, I'm writing my next James Bond book, and this is what I think. I think I'm going to have him do this and do this and do this. Would that really work? I mean, is that doable? I mean, that's this guy. Okay, he was knighted by the Queen. I mean, he's the real deal. And that was Caitlin's teacher, because he didn't feel that she would survive this mission if he didn't train her, but he didn't want her there. And you guys are romantic moderns, right? This is the between those two. But as time goes on throughout the mission, she has to stay in the mission because of this antagonist, this guy that's running everything, just loves her. So every time that they can't get another agent to go into a more dangerous situation, Caitlin's invited. So Caitlin stays in, and so he has to train her more. Pretty soon, Caitlin knows how to fire, an assault rifle, for defense. I mean, so everything happens to Caitlin that isn't supposed to happen to her. And so she ends up going to the very end of the, very dangerous mission. Wants to, butt out, after the first phase. And so that's what makes Mission Thaw so, it's very much a page turner, because you're wondering, can this woman survive the next thing that happens to her? And he tries to protect her, and there's another one that does as well. But there is definitely a love triangle there, and you'll have to read it to see who wins.
Yeah, don't give it all away.
I'm not.
When
I'm
you're
not.
when you're talking about it, and even maybe when you were writing it, do you see this action happening, and then does it play out like a movie in your head?
Oh,
Like,
it
do you
does
see
to
it as a
everyone that
film
reads it.
cinematically?
And to tell you the truth, I just wanted to write a screen script, right from the beginning. I mean, because I see this as a series, and my friends and I have had the cast picked out for a long time, and that may change.
Isn't that fun?
Well, it's a long time that I've been writing it, but I mean, but then I was told, and now a few people have said, it really wasn't correct, but that I had to write a book first, and then you presented it to people, screenwriters and that kind of thing, and they could adapt it, if they wanted or whatever. And so, yes, I absolutely, being an actor, and I'm also a movie buff as well as reading all the time. I definitely saw it always, the action in my head. And now I'm told by my readers they do too. They see a movie as they're reading it.
Sure.
It moves that fast. I mean, we really
Right.
honed down, so it reads, it kind of reads like a screen script. Yeah.
So in your imagination of this being a movie, do you have a director in your head that would be someone you would want to direct it?
I have producers.
Okay.
I want to present it to Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg, because
Okay.
they have done such great things with World War II movies and stories. And then they did, dip into the Cold War with Bridge of Spies. And so I think with the brand new type of protagonist we have, this, 1980s, opera singing female spy, and, incredibly evil antagonists, especially the KGB officers and what they do to these refugees. And Caitlin witnesses all that, like in she's hidden, and she's watching one of these auctions where they They buy these people and send them to work camps and everything, and she witnesses the refugee camps and everything. So, um, you know, yeah, um, I think the movie draws incredible empathy, particularly for the women refugees, and it's so exciting because you really don't think Caitlin's going to make it through this. And so you got to keep waiting to see if she does, because many times it doesn't look like that's going to be the case at all. She will perish, you know. And then Caitlin finally does go to the end, and then something really bad happens to her, you know. And so then you wonder, oh, what's going to happen with that now, you know? So it keeps you on the edge of your seat, but it also keeps you, it makes you laugh sometimes. She's got a really funny sense of humor. And so does one of the other agents, and they kind of have repartee between them. They're the only two that really do have a sense of humor, the Dutch guy and her. But it'll make you cry too. It'll make you cry many times.
It'll be like my own little mini opera about a spy, an opera singing
That's
spy.
right.
Hmm.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
So
Kate, being somebody who is kind of a self-made author after having a career in opera, I'm wondering if you get asked for advice a lot, and if you do, what kind of advice do you give to somebody who wants to be a writer for the first time, midstream, midlife? You know, what would you say?
yeah, Authority Magazine just had me make a video of the 5 things I've learned the most about, this process. Um, First of all, I think it's too late to write a story down. My story is very unique in that it started out as a PTSD journal project. Um, I was being treated at a base for PTSD. And I was, involved in music therapy, art therapy, and they said, well, we'd like to get you in some writing therapy. And so, I started writing the journal for the psychiatrist, and the doctor, you know, after the very first time said, this would make a really good book. Have you thought about that? And I'm like, well, heck no, you told me to write it down. I'm writing it down. And so he said, well, you might want to think about that. And so I did. And I thought, well, that would be kind of cool to try that. And I had no way of knowing what I was getting into. And so I probably did everything the wrong way and had to learn, trying to, like I went to an author, and someone that a friend knew, and she said, well, I would read read what you've written. She had no idea I had written a 90,000 word book. And
Wow.
I handed it to her at the cafe, and she was like, you wrote a whole book? I'm like, yeah, aren't I supposed to? She went, not usually, there's a few chapters to see if it's gotten any bones and stuff. Well, she said, I'll be willing to read the whole book. And so then we got back together, and she said, well, it's quite a story, but it needs to be crafted. And so, you know, at that point, she told me what needed to be done, and I went out and found the education and people to help me with that. And then the book was finished, and then started the whole traditional publishing wah 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 wah. Right? I mean,
Hmm.
holy moly, I mean, so my partner, he had a job where he had a little free time every day. So, and I was super busy with my studio and all. And so I said, and I was also a professor at the time. I said, well, why don't you every day send, we wrote a query, wrote a synopsis, all that stuff the agents want. Why don't you submit to 3 agents a day? And we made lists on the weekend and everything. And he did that for months. And I
Wow.
did hear from a lot of them, which, sometimes you don't even hear, but I did. And then I'll say, wow, you're a really good writer, but My boss says that an opposing spy is not believable, so we're going to have to pass. I must have heard that a gazillion times. And I'm laughing because I'm like, oh, yeah, it's not believable. That's interesting, And so I'm like, hmm. And so, knowing that it is the truth, right? And so I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And so I'm like, okay, so this guy calls me, and he's one of these people that redoes your helps you rewrite your query, and he
Mhm.
swears that he can get agents to say yes by your query. So I pay him money, and we get to know each other. And after a couple of weeks, he says, well, listen, I'm in this group that has, writers conferences, and there's one pretty close to you in Minneapolis. Why don't you come to that? And we're going to have live agents there. And I think with your personality, that can be a boost for you, to get to that next level. Okay. So I sign up for it, and I drive over there, and I, pay the money and everything, and I take the classes. And then there's this portion of it where I go into this big room, and there's all these agents, and you get 10 minutes with them. Well, they only
Mhm.
let like eight authors in there at a time. So I'm waiting in line, right? And the first two sets come out, and like nobody got a hit. No one. And I'm like, okay, well, there you go. And so finally it's my turn. I walk out, and 4 out of 8 authors, and some of them couldn't give me their card because they were like children's literature. I mean, obviously that's not my book, right? But the four that dealt with my genre, I come out there with cards, and they've told me what to send them. So now I'm really, really encouraged, right? I'm like, Dad,
Yeah.
God, my first time. And I didn't, that maybe he was right. I should do these in person. And to make a long story short, I have to tell you a funny thing though. They talk about the elevator pitch. Well, I've never done one of those, but I've done an escalator pitch because the last ladies had to run for the airport, and she said, "Well, you can just come out to outside with me." So we went up this great big hotel escalator, and I was giving her my pitch, and then I finished it before she got in the cab. But all right, so I've got 4 women who say yes, 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 I love this idea, send me more. I send the stuff, they send me back, this is great, this is great, this is great. Long story short, do you think any of them signed me? No.
I'm gonna say, "Oh, no, I was hoping one person."
No. And so now I'm I'm looking at the odds. I'm a Virgo. I believe in, what is, right? And so
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, I took these classes while I was there on self-publishing and hybrid publishing. Okay. So now I've got all my little handouts. I'm reading about that. And about that time, that guy calls me back, and he says, wow, in 2 months, you can sign up for, we're having another one out in San Francisco, and it's going to be a lot bigger, and there's going to be a lot more agents there. And I'm thinking, okay, what did I spend on this one at Minneapolis? Cool thousand, right? For a weekend.
Mhm.
Now I'm going to be looking at probably 3,000 to go out to San Francisco. And I could still not have anything, you know, to show for it. So why don't I
Mhm.
read these handouts and start really researching these areas? Because maybe rather than go to all these things and spend all this money and have nothing to show for it, if I do this and invest my money in that, at least I got a book in my hand at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I gave up on traditional publishing. And I have to say I gave up on it maybe pretty quick. But, I'm no spring chicken. I wanted to get a book out, you know what I mean? And so
Mhm.
now we're looking at, I found who I want to work with, and it's a hybrid publisher, and it's pretty expensive. And so I'm like, okay, I own a house. I own a lot of equity in the house. So I go to my banker, and they're very easy, like, sure, we'll give you an equity loan. So I literally took out a loan, a second mortgage on my house so I could do this book. because
Wow.
that's how much I wanted this book to come out. I think people need to read this book because of the message it has about human trafficking and how prevalent it still is today. And so I just said, I've never been a person that had hobbies. I've never spent a lot of money on hobbies. So now this might end up being the most expensive hobby I've ever had, but let's do it. And so that's what I mean, that I don't do things traditionally. I do things out of the box. And I got very impatient and frustrated with traditional publishing because, I didn't fit in their box. My opera singing spy did not fit in their box. And I just thought, well, I'll show them because people are
And
going to
you
like
did.
this if they get a chance to read it. And I did it. Yeah.
And,
And
yeah.
I don't think I ever want anything to do with them. People ask me all the time, well, if your book really starts selling, and if you were to get, if you sell the rights to, screenwriters agency or whatever, they'll all come running. I'll be like, well, they can come running if they want, but they better have something darn good to offer. Or I have nothing to say to those people, you know, because I
Like
think
you
it's a broken system for a lot of people. I really do.
I would agree. Like we've heard from a few different people that the traditional way of publishing, it was either they sacrificed so much of their original story for something, or
Yep.
they really never kind of got anywhere with that. But I think for you, it's made it so clear that you're so passionate about telling the story that you want to tell in the way that you want to tell it and finding people who
Hmm.
support that vision. And I think that's
Hmm.
come across very, very clear.
Yeah, and
Well,
your heart
thank
is
you.
in it. Your heart's in this project, and so you
Yeah.
get to call the shots that way.
Yeah, a lot of the podcasts that I do are not really talking about mission thought until the very end. I mean, a lot of human, the King connections and things like that. They're getting a hold of me because they want to talk to me about human trafficking, and I'm more than willing to talk about that. Or feminists want to talk to me about, my character and how she broke the glass ceiling in the CIA. There's just so many good messages in this book that and particularly the human trafficking message. People always think, well, I know it happens. Well, it happens. You know, millions and millions. Was it 21 million people? The world, the International Labor Organization is saying that 21 million people are being trafficked right at this moment worldwide.
Mhm.
21 million people. That's a big problem. And then people go, well, yeah, I don't know anybody's being trafficked. Well, they'd be surprised because I always want to make this point. I live in a small college town in Wisconsin. There are 17,000 people in this town. And a few months ago, there's a weekly paper that they put out here. And on the front page was 7 men that was arrested for human trafficking, particularly underage girls for prostitution.
Wow.
Now, that's in my tiny little town in Wisconsin. Don't tell me it's not in your backyard because it ended up being in my backyard.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, this book, hopefully, yes, it's entertaining and it's thrilling, but what I hope is that people become more aware of human trafficking and keep their eyes open. And if they believe that there might be something like that going on, report it. And also get involved. At least give money to these organizations that are trying to give aid to these poor people. So, yeah. And I think it's a feminist issue. I mean, so many, eh, eh, well, everyone gets trafficked. I mean, I was surprised to find out lately that seniors are being trafficked now.
There, it's
I mean, so
we
it's in of our society, but yeah.
Well, and I'm going to interrupt you real quick just so anybody has the information. Or I'm sorry, so that people do have the information. I just want to give really quick the human trafficking hotline is 888-373-7888, or you can text info to 233-733. And Trey, I think you've got one
Thank
last
you.
question.
No, I don't. The questions I was going to ask, you actually answered them.
Okay. Sorry.
So no, you're good. Kay, I want to thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing your passion of your book. I was already going to buy a copy of it just because of the subject matter, and there was opera in it. Now I have so much more of a reason to go and read it and devour it and really have that own picture of the movie in my head. So I want to thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for
I
joining
really.
and spending. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
I
I
think
was
there
just
was
going to
just a
say thank
delay
you
there.
for having me. Yeah, we have a little delay right now. Thank you for having me, and I think you'll enjoy. I think it's the second or third chapter. There's a little bit of her debut, and I think you'll enjoy at the Vienna Staatsoper, and then the backstage stuff. I think you'll get a kick out of that. You understand that more than the average bear. Yeah.
Very much so. Um, well, as we close this episode out, I also want to give a shout out to a friend of mine, Elise Jacobs, who is also an opera singer and an author. So, Elise, if you are listening to this, I would encourage you to pick up a copy of Kay's book. We'll talk about it. Talk about it later. But I wanted to give her a nice shout out. You can also follow the future adventures with Kay on her Instagram at Mission Thaw on Instagram. Um, this episode and more behind the scenes content can be found on our Patreon. Search for The Mod Rom on Patreon. You can also search our website at themodrom.com for past episodes and other content. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Have a great evening.